Most people look at Europe and see elegance, wealth, and centuries of stability. They see polished streets, efficient public transport, generous welfare systems, and governments that seem more organized than almost anywhere else on Earth. But what if all of that is misleading? What if Europe, the region many people believe is the most stable and prosperous on the planet, is quietly falling apart from the inside? The mystery isn't why Europe is struggling now. The real mystery is how an economic superpower managed to hide decades of silent decline beneath political optimism, borrowed comfort, and artificial prosperity. Today, we're going to unravel that story and reveal the 6 fatal wounds that have pushed Europe into what experts are calling its most perilous era since World War II. What you're about to hear isn't speculation or fear-mongering. It's the product of 40 years of decisions, crises, dependencies, and demographic realities that Europe simply never prepared for. And as we peel back the layers, you'll see that the collapse isn't sudden at all. It's the final stage of a long chain of vulnerabilities that were ignored, underestimated, or misunderstood. To understand why Europe is breaking down today, we need to return to the beginning, back to the hopeful decades after World War II. When European leaders tried to build a new kind of economic paradise, Europe was in ruins. But in that devastation, something remarkable emerged. A determination to never again let war or economic depression tear the continent apart. Nations that had fought for centuries came together to form the European Coal and Steel Community, which later evolved into the European Economic Community, and ultimately the European Union. The big promise was simple and seductive. By sharing resources, integrating economies, and eventually creating a single currency, Europe could create permanent peace and unmatched prosperity. Germany would rebuild itself as an industrial powerhouse. France would shape diplomacy and agriculture. Italy and Spain would transform into modern economies. And Eastern Europe would rise again after the fall of the Soviet Union. The introduction of the euro seemed like the final piece of the puzzle. Europe wasn't just a region. It was becoming a superpower, united by markets, currency, and policies. But hidden beneath this optimistic story were early cracks, small ones at first, subtle enough that even economists didn't pay much attention. In the 1970s, Europe's birth rates fell dramatically. People were having fewer children, and the massive welfare state model, built on the assumption of a large working population, began to lose its foundation. At the same time, industries were shifting overseas. Factories that had fueled the post-war boom moved to cheaper regions like Asia. Europe embraced the idea that it could become a post-industrial society focused on services rather than manufacturing. Leaders believed this was progress, not decline. Meanwhile, as more countries joined the European project, the push for a unified currency became unstoppable. But this created a dangerous imbalance. Countries with completely different economic structures were suddenly tied to the same interest rates and exchange rates. Germany's export-driven economy thrived under the euro, while southern countries struggled. They could no longer devalue their currencies to stay competitive. It was the first major structural trap, and because prosperity was rising, nobody noticed or cared. Through the 1990s and early 2000s, Europe entered what many considered its golden age. The euro was launched, Eastern Europe opened up, Germany became the world's top exporter, and the UK turned London into the financial capital of the world. Italy's luxury industry boomed, and Spain underwent a construction miracle that reshaped its entire economy. On the surface, everything was going right, but underneath, Europe's prosperity was surprisingly artificial. Instead of building a resilient, self-sufficient system, Europe became deeply dependent on 3 external pillars: cheap Russian energy, Chinese manufacturing, and American security. Russia provided the cheap gas that powered Europe's factories. China became the workshop of the world, producing everything from solar panels to electronics at unbeatable prices. And the United States quietly protected European trade routes, tech systems, and global interests through NATO. Europe enjoyed the benefits, but never built alternatives. It believed these pillars would last forever. And that assumption would prove catastrophic. The illusion of stability shattered in 2008 when the global financial crisis hit. It exposed the Eurozone's biggest flaw: a shared currency without a shared fiscal union. Southern Europe faced massive debt crises. Youth unemployment exploded, reaching over 50% in countries like Spain and Greece. Germany demanded strict austerity, which only deepened the suffering. For the first time, average Europeans began to feel that something was fundamentally broken. Then came the second shock. China, once a cheap manufacturing partner, evolved into a global competitor. It moved up the value chain and overtook Europe in solar technology, electronics, battery production, steel output, and even automotive innovation. European industries that had once dominated the world now depended heavily on Chinese markets and Chinese exports. The third shock was demographic. As birth rates kept falling, Europe's workforce shrank dramatically. Even with immigration, the numbers didn't balance. Pension systems became dangerously strained, and governments responded with more debt. But the fourth and most devastating shock arrived in 2022. The energy crisis triggered by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In a single night, Europe lost the cheap fuel that its entire industrial model depended on. Natural gas prices skyrocketed by over 1,000%. Factories shut down, production collapsed, and Germany, Europe's economic engine, entered a severe industrial decline. And so, the 6 fatal wounds that had been quietly forming for decades were finally exposed. The first wound is demographic collapse. Europe is aging faster than almost any region in the world. Birth rates are so low that without immigrants, populations would shrink rapidly. Italy has one of the lowest birth rates ever recorded. Germany depends heavily on migration to replace workers. France, once a demographic bright spot, has now fallen below replacement level. A shrinking workforce means fewer taxpayers, higher pension costs, slower growth, and more government debt. Companies relocate to regions with younger, cheaper labor. The second wound is energy dependence. Europe bet everything on cheap Russian gas and shut down alternative sources like nuclear and coal long before renewables were ready to replace them. When Russia cut supply, Europe had no backup plan. Energy prices exploded, forcing factories, especially in Germany, to shut down or relocate to countries like the United States, where energy is cheaper and more abundant. The third wound is deindustrialization. Europe believed it could abandon large-scale manufacturing and rely on high-value services and luxury goods. But manufacturing is the backbone of real economic power. It drives exports, innovation, and productivity. When Europe outsourced production to China, it lost not only jobs, but also technological leadership. Today, China outcompetes Europe in nearly every major industrial sector. The fourth wound is overregulation. Europe's bureaucracy, while intended to create fairness and stability, has become suffocating. Innovation slows under heavy compliance costs. Startups flee to the United States. Renewable energy projects take years to approve. AI development is bogged down by legal frameworks that make European companies globally uncompetitive. Europe is stable but slow, safe but stagnant. The fifth wound is the Eurozone imbalance. A single currency binds together economies that are wildly different. Germany's model thrives under the euro, while Italy, Greece, Spain, and Portugal struggle without the ability to devalue their currencies. Southern nations remain trapped in slow growth and rising debt. The euro keeps Europe together, but also prevents many countries from ever fully recovering. The sixth and final wound is political fragmentation. Every major crisis in Europe reveals the same pattern: disagreement, delay, and division. During the migration crisis, countries clashed over responsibility. During the debt crisis, North and South fought over austerity. During the energy crisis, each nation scrambled for its own solution. During debates on industrial policy, the EU's 27 members cannot agree on a single strategy. While China acts decisively and the US invests aggressively in industry, Europe is stuck in endless negotiation. A union without unity is slow, reactive, and vulnerable, and the economic consequences are severe. Today, the fallout is visible everywhere. Growth has stalled across the continent. Germany, once the engine of Europe, is now performing worse than most major economies. Manufacturing is shrinking. Energy prices remain uncompetitive. Public debt has exploded. Youths are leaving Southern and Eastern Europe in massive numbers. The welfare state is becoming unsustainable. Birth rates are the lowest in history. Political extremism is rising, and the gap between Northern and Southern Europe is widening again, echoing the same tensions that nearly tore the Eurozone apart a decade ago. Europe has tried to fix its problems, but most solutions have failed or made things worse. To fix the demographic crisis, governments rely heavily on immigration, but without proper integration, social tensions rise and employment gaps remain. To fix energy dependence, Europe buys liquefied natural gas at extremely high prices, making industry even less competitive. To fix deindustrialization, Europe introduces subsidies, but bureaucracy slows everything down. To fix overregulation, Europe creates new committees that add more regulations. To fix the Eurozone imbalance, politicians debate endlessly but refuse to make structural reforms. Problem solving itself has become one of Europe's biggest problems. Decisions take too long, compromises water down every plan, and political divisions freeze progress. The patterns we're seeing in Europe today echo some of history's greatest economic declines. Ancient Rome collapsed under demographic decline and dependency. Venice fell when trade routes shifted. The Ottoman Empire weakened under internal fragmentation and bureaucracy. The Soviet Union collapsed after years of stagnation, inefficiency, and political deadlock. Europe today mirrors all these patterns at once. Aging populations, external dependence, weakened industry, internal division, and slow decision-making. And the data is shocking. Europe's share of global GDP has fallen from 25% in 1992, less than 15% today. Its share of global innovation is slipping. Its manufacturing output is falling behind Asia and the United States. Its energy costs are among the highest in the developed world. Its demographics are the worst of any major economic region. And its political unity is weakening. There are three major lessons from this decline. First, Europe is not collapsing suddenly. This is the final stage of a long, slow decline created by decades of unresolved vulnerabilities. Second, the world has changed faster than Europe has. Globalization, energy markets, demographics, and technology transformed the world economy, but Europe remained tied to old assumptions. Third, decline is not destiny. Europe can recover, but only if it confronts these problems directly instead of delaying them through political compromise. It must rebuild industry, reform regulations, invest in energy independence, modernize the Eurozone, and support families and workers in meaningful ways. The window is closing fast, but it is still open. As we close, consider this. Europe stands at a crossroads. If it continues to ignore the 6 fatal wounds, the decline will accelerate. But if it acts now boldly, decisively, and honestly, it could transform the next decade from a breaking point into a turning point. The question is not whether Europe has the potential to recover, the question is whether it has the courage to face the truth. If you want more deep, long-form breakdowns of global economic shifts, make sure to subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and send this video to someone who needs to understand what's really happening beneath the surface. The world is changing fast, and we're here to make sense of it together.